Good evening, everyone. Welcome to American Advocates. This will be episode 141, coming to you live on July 15th, 2026, with a couple of interesting...
My partner shouted, our checking account is at zero.
Excuse me a second
We're out of
there.
business. I told him.
Forgot to mute that. A lot to discuss today. Actually, only a little bit to discuss today, but the topics are actually very important to go over. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you guys too. I'm just winging this one completely off the dome. I have no notes tonight. Nothing really. I did do some reading and some research, but I think the messaging here is going to be somewhat self-explanatory. So this episode, the heat has. I'm not gonna lie, the heat has been getting to me all week. It's been zapping me, and I've had to lay down and just really contemplate and ponder what is life, and really think hard about how much I really want to do these shows. Not because I don't love doing them, but just, my God, this heat is killer right now. And not that I love the winter, I love the summer. Holy, it is crazy. So I'm just winging this show entirely based off of some of the news, the headlines that I saw and what I read today. No organized structure to today's show. And basically, it's going to be easy, in my opinion, to do that because this really does follow what I've been talking about when it comes to the GOP and the Republican Party and their messaging, and when it really comes to what's happening right now in our American political landscape when it comes to winning messaging and which party really is figuring out what will win future elections, which party is figuring it out, and which party is falling behind again. And that's what I want to go over here, because here's some of the headlines that caught my attention, that once again were emerging as I was sort of preparing to go live originally to talk about what was JD Vance's appearance on Joe Rogan. I did listen to that entire episode on Joe Rogan too, for the record. And JD Vance did appear on it, and he talked about quite a bit of different topics. They initially started discussing things like, they were reminiscing about how stupid Kamala Harris is, and then they went into topics about Joe Biden, and how dumb he was, and, how easy he was to beat, and how much of a disaster the Biden administration was. They wound up talking about aliens, but then they hit some other hard-hitting topics, and I was going to talk exclusively about that tonight, but now that this news has emerged, I'm going to get into this first, and the news is, just like how yesterday I was telling you that the Democrats are saving America, because they are. And I don't care how that fucking sounds to any Republican that wants to be a tightwad about it, or I don't care what you want to argue about for the reasons that they're doing it, what kind of political game is being played out here. The fact of the matter is the Democrats are saving America right now, while the Republicans are trying their very best to sell us up the river and really, really subjugate us to Israel. And I mentioned yesterday, on yesterday's episode, that Mike Johnson and the Republicans in the House were having a hard time passing what I inaccurately referred to as House Resolution 8800. It's not a House resolution. I don't know. This is what I mean by being so exhausted. I'm even making some mistakes when I'm live. HR stands for House of Representatives, not House Resolution. A resolution is an internal decision to change policy. HR 8800 is it's the NDAA. It's our National Defense Authorization Act for 2027. I mentioned yesterday how Speaker Mike Johnson was trying to push this through the House of Representatives very quickly on June 30th, the final day that they were in session before going on another 2.5 week recess for July, calling it what would be a gift to Americans for America's 250th birthday on July 4th. And I mentioned yesterday how there was a dissident right-wing movement rising up in the House. It was only about 4 Republicans total, but enough to sway the vote to strike down the NDAA, which is what happened. Anna Paulina Luna actually led the movement. Mike Johnson got pissed at her. The vote didn't make it through, and they went into recess. They went into a recess without passing the National Defense Authorization Act, which includes what was at the time Section 224, Israeli integration into our military. So that all happened. And now what we saw to follow up on that was what I covered yesterday. The Republicans aggressively are trying to push this through, and they were trying originally, here's the ridiculous part. They were originally trying to push this through in time for July 4th, when we gained our independence. We gained our independence as a sovereign nation from Britain and became our own united nation with our own sovereignty. The cruel irony in it is that the Republicans now are such cucks for Zionism, and they are such little bitch ass Israel worshippers that they thought it a good idea to pass this bill in time for July 4th, where we would agree, for no other reason other than literally Israel cuckery, to pass a bill that includes Section 224, which will force us to become dependent on Israel for our military equipment when we literally do not need them for that at all. We never have, and if we choose, apparently, if we choose to remain this way, we never will need Israel for our military equipment. In fact, it's always been the reverse. They have always needed us. And I covered yesterday how it was Benjamin Netanyahu himself gloating about how he wrote this particular section in our legislation that the Republicans are trying to pass. Then I went over yesterday how the Senate Democrats unanimously, pretty much, struck down the Senate's version of the NDAA. That was S.4347, I believe it was, or 4357. And that is their own version of the NDAA, which also has their own section that is almost the same as Section 224 of the House of Representatives 8800. Same kind of concept written into it. Israeli tech integration into our U.S. military. And it wasn't the Republicans in the Senate who struck this down. It was the Democrats alongside Rand Paul, an independent, who voted present rather than yay or nay. All the Democrats pretty much voted nay. So the Democrats, I said, whether it pissed off Republicans or not, I said it yesterday, the Democrats saved America, at least temporarily, even if not for technically all of the right reasons. The Democrats in the Senate struck down and voted against their version of the NDAA simply as a spiteful, rebellious act against President Donald Trump for prosecuting this Iran war. This was a protest in the Senate by the Democrats for doing that. And it's been the Republicans now that are literally seeking to almost enslave our U.S. military and subjugate our country to Israel, and they're standing united in that. That's what this Republican Party is now. This bill, this NDAA with these sections included in it, is literally us giving away our sovereignty to Israel. Just so you understand, I want people to be very clear on that and how I read it and where I stand on this, and why I will be voting down the line Democrat on my own ballots. I'm done supporting this Republican Party. They've lost me probably for good, in all honesty. Unless I see a good candidate, I will vote Democrat knowing that they will gain power and destroy this nation, and good. I want this all done. I want this burnt to the ground at this point. There is no saving this until we have the right people rising up and running ideally as conservatives. I'm not voting for it. I am done with this party. It is disgusting. Same, fed up, says JR3053. And if you're with me on that, type the same in chat as well. We need to unite against this disgusting Republican Party that is trying to literally enslave us to a foreign country, all in the name of this faulty fucking Israel worship with these Zionist pigs that control everything. I am done. I just want to put that out there. I am done with this party. I'm done voting for any of these motherfuckers who, ironically, tragically so, literally tried to push out in time for July 4th. July 4th, where we gained independence. So that's that right there. Now, what's happening today? In the aftermath of this happening in the Senate, where every Republican voted literally, every Republican voted literally to try to pass this. It was the Democrats that stopped it. What happens today? Well, this New York Times article explains it, as now we're seeing in the House, and I mentioned this yesterday. I said there was a bipartisan movement. I covered this yesterday. Bipartisan movement between Thomas Massie, while we still have him for the last few months that he is the representative in Kentucky for Kentucky District 4 or 5. Thomas Massie in the House alongside Ro Khanna, the same duo that brought us the Epstein Files Transparency Act, by the way. Perhaps the most benevolent bipartisan duo I've ever seen in my life politically, actually. Because they united together alongside, at the time, Marjorie Taylor Greene and even Lauren Boebert to a degree as well. They united together in bipartisan fashion to flip off the Trump administration and Pam Bondi at the time and say, fuck you, actually. You're going to release the Epstein files. You mean all of that proof that points to suspects who are raping children on an island? Yeah, we actually do want to know all of their names. And preferably, some of us hardliners, like myself included, want those names, those very public names, or what should be public names in the Epstein files. We want them to face justice. And by that, I mean, I want them lined up in the town square and shot. Like, I want them killed by the government, of course. But I want them fucking dead. And I'm talking Republican or Democrat. I don't care what the fuck they are. If they're in the Epstein files and they're a suspect and they're found guilty, I want them literally shot to death by a firing squad in front of people in the public town square as an example. That's what I want. And I think there's going to be a growing appetite for that that's currently being suppressed and denied by the Republicans, and it's going to cost them huge, which is one more reason why I want to literally watch this Republican Party burn to the ground. Only through its ashes can a real far-right movement rise. And trust me, it's going to take a very, very far-right movement. We don't need moderates. We don't need centrists. We don't need the pussy little fence sitters who split their assholes open from staying on the fence for so long. We don't need any of that when it comes to being in power. We need the furthest right possible to cleanse this nation and these lands and to purify America once again. And so that's what we're waiting on. And when the Republicans continue to deny us the justice of the Epstein files through the Transparency Act that Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, as I was saying, joined together, a Democrat and Republican, joined together to force this act, which has yet to be fulfilled entirely by this Trump administration, as they have still suppressed over half of the Epstein files, and what we did get was heavily redacted. Not only that, but many of the names in the list were redacted when they shouldn't have been, while some of the victims who should have been redacted weren't. All of this has happened under the Trump administration. And this same duo, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, who came together back then last year to force the Epstein files to be released. And these two, alongside MTG, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and alongside even a little bit of Lauren Boebert we can throw in there, we can literally thank them for having what we even have when it comes to Epstein. Because if it weren't for them, that blonde bimbo bitch who I hated nearly from the beginning and spoke out about on this channel early on, as far back probably as April, Pam Bondi, if it was up to her exclusively, they would have never been put out. They would have stayed on her desk in a large pile, or whatever proverbial you want to go with there story-wise, and we wouldn't have gotten any of it. And now this same duo pushed forward, as I announced yesterday, Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. They were pushing forward this new idea that we should cut all of our foreign aid to Israel. This was just, they just went for it. Thomas Massie went for it because, well, he's got nothing left to lose now anyway, since he was literally purchased out of his seat by that Jewish whore, Miriam Adelson, with $20 million, that Zionist pig bitch. And then Ro Khanna, he actually has everything to gain from this because the Democrats are starting to figure out the strategy a lot quicker than Republicans are, and they're going to win because of it, and they deserve to. But because they've teamed up and they did this, they pushed forward this vote now, and they forced a House vote on this. Here were the results of this. It wound up failing in the House of Representatives in a final vote of 314 to 104, if I remember that correctly. 314 to 104. And what's significant about this is that every single Republican, except for Thomas Massie, who proposed this bill with Ro Khanna, every single Republican voted against Thomas Massie on it. And they voted instead in favor of continuing to send $3.8 billion in annual foreign aid to Israel. Every single Republican in the House voted that way. Meanwhile, it's the Democrat Party that actually split on this. And this is what's interesting, because just like I said yesterday when it came to the Senate and how it was the Democrat senators with, you could say, Rand Paul for voting present rather than like a smartass, rather than voting nay or yay. Every single Democrat senator yesterday voted against that National Defense Authorization Act, which has, at least for now, halted the progression of these sections in these acts that are basically forcing the United States to lose its sovereignty to Israel, that the Republicans are aggressively pushing. And so the Senate Democrats yesterday saved the day, even if not for all of the right reasons. Now today, it's become very clear, actually, that many of these Democrat officials and politicians are actually fully awake to the winning messaging. Because yesterday I played it off a little bit yesterday. Yesterday I said, hey, listen, they weren't doing this to strike down the Israel section of the act, which is still mostly true as it stands today. And I was saying they were doing it to protest Trump's Iran war, which I actually sort of get behind. I despise this stupid war, and I always have. And on this channel, as you know, I've been completely right almost in how this war has played out. The only prediction I've yet to be correct on so far has been boots on the ground, which I predicted the second day of the war in my infinite intellectual superiority, which is why you should like the stream right now. I'm smarter than you, I'm better looking, I'm more charismatic, and everything I touch turns to gold. You should like the stream, double tap your phone screens. It's that easy. I'm a prophet. You should literally watch this show every day. You'll be a lot smarter for it. You should just recognize that. I am just right. I am smart. I am better than you. Like the stream right now and subscribe for more content like this. You literally need a channel like this. You are so stupid, you fucking goy scum, and your friends are even dumber. So my promise to you is you start watching this show, you start repeating what I'm telling you around your even dumber friends, and you will quickly rise up as the leader because you'll at least start sounding halfway smart. You absolute dullards. Otherwise, I've been right about this war from the start. So I said the Democrats were protesting it, and I sort of stand behind it. But widely, I said they weren't really voting against that NDAA in the Senate for the right reason of striking down the Israeli tech integration. And I still believe that for the most part, but what I am getting at right now is this is now very clear messaging being sent by the Democrats, who in the House of Representatives today, 103 of them split from the other half of Democrat House representatives and from all of the Republican representatives to vote in favor of Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna's bill to cut all foreign aid to Israel. 103 of them voted in favor of this. This is all that they were voting on. This is not something that was part of something major or bigger. They were literally voting on just cutting foreign aid from Israel. And some Democrats have always been pushing for this. 2 years ago, just over 30 of them actually voted outright in favor of something similar, but it was only 30 of them. That number 2 years later has now grown over 3 times that amount, which means the Democrats are figuring out the messaging. This is a New York Times article here. New York Times article here on this. It says almost half of House Democrats vote to end aid to Israel. It says the measure failed, but the level of support among Democrats exposed a stark shift in the party away from backing the Jewish state. It says the House on Wednesday rejected a measure to eliminate U.S. aid to Israel, but almost half of Democrats supported the move, reflecting a rapid and dramatic shift within the party away from decades of unequivocal support for the Jewish state. The measure, which sought to cut all $3.8 billion in military and humanitarian aid to Israel from a foreign affairs spending bill, failed by a vote of 104 to 314, with 10 voting present and all but one Republican, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, a sponsor, voting no. But more Democrats supported it than opposed it, including many who said they voted in favor despite their opposition to the cuts to humanitarian aid. It was the latest and starkest evidence of a major divide over backing Israel within the Democratic Party, which is grappling with a groundswell of hostility in its ranks towards Israel and towards its conduct of the war in Gaza. Supporters said the measure was their only way to register their opposition to the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon, and their desire for a fundamental change in the course in the U.S. relationship with Israel. I've been going over this now and alerting, just putting out messaging on this for quite a while. And now this is the most distinct and clear evidence of what I've been saying coming to fruition. It really didn't even start yesterday, like I said, when it came to the Senate Democrats opposing the NDAA, their version of it, that has resulted in the halt of Israeli integration into our military tech and equipment. It actually has started before this. And for my consistent regular viewers on this show, like the stream, by the way, like the stream, double tap your phone screens, especially if you're consistent viewers, you guys know better. Get these likes up. It's the least you could do, you filthy fucking goyim mooches. I can't believe people come here in these numbers and you can't even like the stream for free. How fucking poor and broke are you, pathetic pieces of goy shit, that you can't even like the stream? What, are your thumbs too fucking fat, you fat fuckers? You guys are that lazy and poor, you can't even like the stream? Burn the 2 calories and like the stream. My God, disgusting. And really, it just reminds me that you goyim deserve to be enslaved and ruled over. You absolute scum. I'm out here preaching the truth and you can't even support this channel. And I do this out of the goodness of my heart. Holy. But anyways, this goes back further. It really does start, and in my opinion, well, it doesn't actually really start with October 7, 2023, but it goes that far back and beyond that. And really, for me, where I've really started ramping up the messaging on this and the warning that the Democrats are figuring this out, I think it's never been more evident than where it was starting even just this year, a few weeks ago. We had the title Zohran Mamdani, the new kingmaker of New York City, it said. And it was pointing to the fact that Zohran Mamdani, a Muslim mayor of New York City who is a democratic socialist, has hand-selected now 3 more democratic socialist primary winners in the respective districts of New York City. They all went on to win. And then from there, while the media was trying to call it a fluke, and it's New York City, it's a bunch of deranged liberals, and they're all poor, and they have no work ethic, they're all bums, and Gen Z doesn't, according to Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary for Trump, doesn't work hard enough, Gen Z, and they want the free stuff, so they're going to fall for the socialism, and it's ridiculous. The fact remains that it wasn't just bound to New York City, because then we go to Colorado just about 2 weeks later, and the Democratic Socialists of America predicted their win out there as well, and they were right. And not only were they right, but the win out there came in the form of a woman in her late 20s toppling a boomer Democrat woman who had been holding that position since 1996. A literal 30-year incumbent Democrat politician losing her primary to a 28-year-old Democratic Socialist of America. And the common theme, as I was talking about then and will remind you of now, was not just democratic socialism, though that obviously is what's binding them all together. They're younger, they're more fiery, they're coming with fresh ideas, even if you don't like them or agree with them. I certainly don't. It sounds fresh. It's not stale. It doesn't remind you of breathing in hospital air when you hear them talk. It doesn't make you feel like you need to unplug their life support to free the world from their stupid, idiotic ideas. And they come here and they speak what they're going to speak, but most importantly, they've all been anti-AIPAC. They've been outspoken against the American Israel PAC lobby. And this is what is most troubling to the mainstream media for that reason. It's what's most troubling to the establishment, and it's what's causing a major divide. But 2 out of the 3, if I remember correctly, 2 out of the 3 candidates Zohran Mamdani picked in New York City to be primary candidates for the Democrats were not only Democratic Socialists, but 2 out of 3 of them were also very outspokenly critical of AIPAC as well. So this is now the theme. It started there on this channel, right? And I said this is what's happening. Not only are the Democrats figuring out the winning messaging, but in addition to that, the Democrats in their own ranks are quickly rejuvenating them with youth faster than the Republicans. And I pointed out at that time on that stream that while the average age of the last four Democratic Socialist primary winners would have been somewhere in the late 30s, because you had a 28-year-old, you have 33-year-old Zohran Mamdani, you had a 34-year-old Democratic Socialist winner. The oldest one was 58, if I remember correctly, but one was 40, two are in their 30s, and one was late 20s. Meanwhile, you have Trump, who literally celebrated, past tense, very past tense now, with the great news of Lindsey Graham's death. He celebrated Lindsey Graham getting reelected and renominated in South Carolina over Mark Lynch, and he celebrated Ed Galrain, a fossil dinosaur of a neocon Zionist pig who worships war and literally ran on drafting the boomers' grandchildren to war for Israel, and he celebrated Ed Galrain defeating Thomas Massie, who's probably about 20 years younger. And so on our side of the aisle here, or what should be our side, and it's certainly not my side anymore. This Republican GOP can fuck itself. I'm totally done with it. I'm a reactionary, and I'll bide my time and wait for the right candidates. And if they never show up, then I'll sip my energy drink in the morning, staring out my window at an America that burns to the ground. And I want the GOP establishment to know that that is the mindset and thought process of most of the youth that would be voting for them. They can go fuck themselves, and I'll literally wake up every morning and stare out my window and watch this all burn. All of it. Until I get the candidates I want, I'm content to stand by and let it happen. They deserve it, first of all. But really, our party is getting older under Trump. MAGA was hijacked by the boomers. That's why all of a sudden the boomers are now focused on bullshit that nobody cares about, and they're screaming at clouds and ranting about the sun, and they're screaming about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. It's because it's a boomer movement now. When you go back to 2015, young guys liked Trump. It was the boomers who said, he swears too much, and I don't really like him. He's not very traditional. That's not really what a candidate should be, don't you think? It was the young people that said, there's something about that guy. Wow, finally, he's saying stuff that I believe. How that script has flipped. I despise Trump, while the boomers suck his cock, and they literally say, this guy's the best ever. They got Cheeto dust around their lips. The Republicans are getting older, and it's very fitting. MAGA is going to fizzle out with Trump, with the end of Trump's presidency, and the boomers are all finally dying off. Finally. And like I've explained in the past, maybe the generational curse that is, hopefully I'm thinking, associated with just the boomers, some of God's curses are associated with just generations. But it is very fitting, and that's how this is all going to end. MAGA is going to end horrendously, unsuccessfully. It's going to be extremely damaging to the Republican movement. The boomers are all dying off. They're aging out of existence and out of politics, etc., etc. And what we're going to be left with as actual America First candidates, actual America First voters and patriots that actually love our country, we're going to be left holding a bag that once was the conservative movement. It will be completely destroyed, full of warmongering neoconservative fossils who are still on the verge of dying, but holding on as long as they can to power, despite being utterly useless to our nation, making all of the wrong decisions that will impact us while they go to the grave never having felt any of the consequences for these decisions they're making on our behalf. And meanwhile, on the Democrat side of the aisle, they're getting younger, they're embracing new ideas, and they're figuring out the winning messaging, which is no more Israel support, no more foreign influence in our elections coming from AIPAC predominantly, and also they're going to run on things like the Epstein Files, a better economy. And they're going to win. It will be a massive blue wave in the midterm elections this year, and that will begin the end of the Trump administration and subsequently MAGA. That's what's on the horizon right here. And this article just continues to expose this. It says the vote has split Democrat leaders. And it says representatives, and I covered yesterday, Hakeem Jeffries of New York, the minority leader, and Pete Aguilar of California voted against the measure, but Representative Catherine Clark of Massachusetts, the minority whip, voted in favor. Ms. Clark said she supported the measure, not because I agree with the entirety of the amendment or the GOP's cynical motivations for its consideration, but because I believe we must change course. Those are the key words. This is what Republicans are waiting on. This is what young Republicans under the age of 45 are waiting on. We are waiting on at least one candidate, and it's already coming with James Fishback. We'll see how he does in his election. Prayers, hoping it's the best. But we are waiting on Republicans to rise up who literally don't look like they were part of the Holocaust, with hollowed out cheeks and an advanced age where they need a walker to exit the chambers of Congress. We're waiting on candidates who are in their 30s and 40s and will tolerate 50s as well to rise up and to say, we need a change of course. We need to get rid of the foreign influence. We are waiting on candidates who will literally speak out against this disgusting Zionist influence in our country. We are not looking for candidates like this anymore, which is most of the boomers, that's their favorite chair. It's the cuck chair, and they are more than happy to cuck for Israel, their beloved Israel, the synagogue of Satan. They don't know how to read their Bibles, and really, they are complete toe-the-party line cucks as well. The boomers don't have balls, they never did. They don't have courage, they never will. The boomers literally will tell you, this is just the way it is, accept it. And the youth, well, we're just a little too fiery and motivated for that bullshit. We have a little bit too much testosterone and a little too much of a fighting, fiery warrior's spirit to us. And what I recognize, sadly, is that the Democrats are figuring it out. And this just goes on, because what you have to understand here is literally the party that is branding itself as America First, or at least trying to, is the Republican Party, especially right now under Trump. And you will see so many Republicans, you will see so many of them saying, oh, I'm America First, I'm America First. You'll try to see some of our own Republican politicians say that. But that's why I can't emphasize enough that every Republican today, except for Thomas Massie, voted in favor of sending the foreign aid to Israel. And for what reason? The Democrats, by the way, the Democrat base has shifted. It's flipped almost entirely on this. Where just 3 years ago, the Democrat base, at only a rate of 28%, supported cutting all foreign aid to Israel. This was, of course, 3 years ago. We're talking October 7th, 2023, and all of the attacks there. The Democrats, only 28% of them at the time, supported cutting all of the aid. Now it's 66%. Want at least less support for Israel. The Republicans need to catch up. It's getting brutal. Now, sadly, the Republicans not only aren't catching up, but they're so far behind that the messaging that I'm seeing on X is also, it makes me want to vomit. Scott Jennings, he's the guy. Oh, that's our guy. He's our representative. Scott Jennings, the fiery guy. He's the guy. I think he's on, CNN? He's meant to be the Republican counter-op. Well, here's what Scott Jennings had to say about this vote today. This is how he's framing this vote that was proposed and put forward in bipartisan fashion by Khanna, a Democrat, and Thomas Massie, a Republican. And again, Thomas Massie winding up being the only Republican supporting it. Scott Jennings says, Massie siding with Democrats, but ultimately failing to pass a law, just about sums up his career. They're just all too happy about it. They think that this is like the final nail in the coffin for Thomas Massie. And perhaps what they view as this small section of the right wing, the far right, woke Reich, as Mark Levin would call it. That's how they're seeing this. And this is Scott Jennings, the mainstream media Republican out there, who's framing it this way. That's just Thomas Massie again, trying to defy the Republicans and siding with Democrats as always, they say. They are completely tone deaf. Utterly and completely tone deaf. It gets even better than that too, really. Because here's what I also want to point out. While all of this is happening, we have, gotta drink some water. Be sure to like the stream, by the way, if you haven't already. You gotta double tap those phone screens and hit the thumbs up button, especially if you're appreciating the messaging. Also subscribe to American Advocates for more content like this. I go live every single night. I'm winging this one, but I feel like, I just wanted to get on here. I didn't want to take another night off after taking Mondays off. Here's where this gets better. Not only is it now the Republicans in unity, except for Thomas Massie, voting to literally cuck ourselves to Israel and subjugate ourselves and our nation and give up sovereignty to Israel via Israeli integration into our U.S. military tech, making us dependent on Israel for no good reason. But in addition to that, all the while, Thomas Massie is now being made fun of by Scott Jennings, mainstream media Republican. Oh, can't believe Thomas Massie, siding with Democrats as always. How dare he suggest that we save $3.8 billion annually of taxpayer money and maybe dedicate that towards something domestically here, while Israel has done nothing but defy us in the Middle East, goad us into this bullshit Iran war that's unwinnable, that's drained us now of hundreds of billions of dollars, and will cost us $1 trillion in the long run, that has cost our soldiers' lives at times. It's costing the global economy. It's putting a dent into it. It's destroying our economy. It's ruining everything here in the United States. It's destroying Trump's chance and the Republicans' chance to win the midterms. Inflation's going up. The housing market hasn't gotten better. Cost of living will get worse. Famine is guaranteed in sub-Saharan Africa. There's going to be all kinds of problems because of this Iran war that we allowed Israel to goad us into and then allowed Israel to continue to manipulate us to keep it going. All of that. And we can't cut foreign aid to this disgusting country. And instead of doing that, at the advisement of one lonely Republican who already has lost his seat effectively to the Israel lobby, instead of that, the mainstream media attacks him and says, well, look at that. Can't believe he'd even propose such an idea. In addition to that, I want to point this out as well. Randy Fine, perhaps the fattest fucker to ever hold office, a fat Jew down in Florida, who's a Republican, mind you, has now positioned himself, using his congressional seat, of course, he's positioned himself against the Save America Act. And this is what I always try to point this out on this channel, how we may despise a lot of this in our country right now and a lot of this foreign influence stuff, and we may despise these people when it comes to their tactics, and by that I mean world Jewry tactics. But here's the truth. Man, are they good at weaponizing them. So Randy Fine, a fat Republican Jew in Florida, is now weaponizing his Congress seat against the Save America Act, the one act where most of Americans support it. And I'm talking 94 to 96% of Republicans across America support the Save America Act. Literally, the act that would require proof of citizenship to vote in our elections. That is a no-brainer, which is why even 65 to 70% of Democrats support it as well. And despite that, our politicians, as I pointed out yesterday, almost symbolically appropriate for this day and age where Americans just aren't being represented by their party leaders at all anymore. We're not being represented by our representatives at all, which is why our Senate under John Thune can't pass it and won't pass it because they don't actually care. Well, you could blame John Thune in the past, and you could blame all of the Senate Democrats who will stand against it. But now you also have to add Randy Fine's name. He's withholding his vote in the future, in now the House, because he cites the fact that Alex Brusiewicz, who is not an official, doesn't have an official administrative title in the Trump administration, but works alongside Trump in the administration, is still holding some sort of informal position with Trump in the administration. And the reason why Randy Fine hates Alex Brusiewicz is because he is in the Trump administration right now in a way that is unacceptable to the Israel First lobby. And that's because Alex Brusiewicz has reportedly become very outspoken against foreign influence, specifically citing Israeli foreign influence. And now he's drawing attention from all of the Israel First Zionist pigs in this country, and by pigs I mean pigs. Like Randy Fine is the definition of that. And so Randy Fine, just like Jews always do, is withholding his vote to harm Trump and the Republican administration and Americans in general until Trump fires Alex Brusiewicz, who doesn't hold an official title to begin with. And this is now some of the latest news on that. He's literally holding Trump's agenda at ransom, and he's a Republican. And in the past, he said, oh, I'm a big ally of Trump. I love Trump. Yeah, until something like this happens, and then they weaponize their vote. They weaponize their vote against Trump and against the American people just to get their way. These filthy Zionist pigs and scum. And this is why this is a great example of this, and why I always bring this up when it comes to voting Democrat in the midterms. The Nick Fuentes strategy that I myself didn't even think I agreed with at first, and now I'm totally on board with. Weaponize your vote. They are the example. They have the strategy down, and it works. Now it's our turn. Would you continue to vote for this absolute filth? What if you live in Randy Fine's district? Are you going to seriously tell me you'd vote for him, a Republican like him? The answer should be no. And I know in my area, there's nobody of merit worth voting for. It's going to be more of the same neocons. So I'm just not voting for them. And you can weaponize your vote by either sitting out of the election, or really truly you want to weaponize your vote, register as a Republican, but then go vote Democrat down the ballot this November. That's the strategy here. Burn the GOP down. This is not the executive branch being decided in the midterms. This is just Congress. It's the House and or possibly now the Senate even, with the boomercons finally all dying off as they've held on to power for about 25 or 30 years too long. They're now getting their just desserts on that. They're literally just dying off. I could, in a crazy world, and it would almost bring a smile to my face, I could see a reality where Republicans lose Senate majority as a result of a combination of midterms not going well and Republican senators just collapsing because they're 89 years old and they should have retired 30 years ago but didn't. But either way, that's what's being determined this year. And it's not the executive, but what will happen is when the blue wave comes in, it will force the Trump administration to come to a grinding halt. And let me tell you something right now. If the Republicans manage to hold on to majority power, even after midterms, we're going to full war with Iran. The actual only hope of stopping that, in my opinion, is, I hate to say this almost, but it is an actual blue wave. Because then they will invoke the War Powers Act against President Donald Trump with their power, and they'll force it through, or they'll do a better job of it. Otherwise, if you haven't noticed, the pattern playing out in Iran right now is a similar pattern that Trump is literally using to limp forward towards the midterms, not with the goal of stopping it all there, but with the goal of limping past the midterms so that he can then bust out into a full-blown sprint towards full-scale boots-on-the-ground war against Iran. There's only a couple of ways this war can end anymore. They've tried ceasefires and the MOU, and they've tried bombing Iran from the skies and the seas, and it's not working. And so it's really, like I said yesterday, it's only nuke them, bomb them into oblivion and leave, or boots on the ground. And really, that's what I think Trump is doing here. I think he is just intentionally drawing this out for as long as possible without committing to what he knows is political poison, which is boots on the ground. And then he's going to wait until after the midterms and go right into it. But if the Democrats have control, then this doesn't happen. It won't. Well, Trump can kind of force it, but the Democrats can at least put up more of a fight. The Republicans clearly won't. And the Republicans will guaranteed not only allow our troops to go into battle, but they'll encourage that our troops go into battle with future Israeli tech integrated into their equipment. And our military will subsequently be more and almost totally dependent on Israel. Like, this is what we're dealing with. So, Randy Fine weaponizes his vote. Time for the Republicans to do that. Hello, you. Are you a white man living in America? Vote Democrat this November, then. Because you're the demographic they take for granted the most. And it should piss you off, whitey. You think they give a fuck about you? As you struggle to even start a family? You can't even... chances are, if you're under 40, I'm under 40, if you're under 40, and you're white, and you're a man in America, the idea of starting a family or owning your own home one day or having a decent job seems so far out of reach, and the Republicans haven't offered any solutions. All they've done is gotten us into a war, and all they're trying to do is give up our sovereignty as a nation to a foreign country. Time to be done with them. Time to let the party collapse under its own disgusting, corrupt, sycophantic, Israel-worshipping weight. And if this doesn't help further the point, Mark Levin, of course, was jumping all over this Randy Fine news today. And he said, I'm going to read it in his pathetic voice. Randy is right. We've a very tough midterm election coming up, and the lowlifes need to be cleaned out as they're turning off too many patriotic Trump supporters. This coming from Mark Levin, who was originally a never-Trumper. And that's what he had to say in response to the news about Randy Fine telling White House officials that he will vote against every rule on the floor until Trump fires Alex Brushewitz, one of his outside advisors. Here we go. I mean, this is where we're at. And this really leads into the other story I wanted to talk about today. By the way, like I said, be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs up button. There's no reason for you to not like the stream. It's free to do, and it helps the YouTube algorithm push this show out to plenty of new eyes who need to see this truth. I am evangelizing the masses right now with the absolute truth. For many, the intolerable truth, but the truth nonetheless. I'm not here to mollycoddle. I'm not here to be kind and gentle. I'm here to be abrasive, because abrasive means to polish, and we need to polish this country up a lot quicker than it's currently being polished. Otherwise, it's all going away. So like the stream, or honestly, get fucking lost. Trim your dead ass weight self right off this channel. We don't even want you here. Literally be gone. But that leads me into my other story for today, which is, of course, JD Vance appearing on Joe Rogan. And again, I'm kind of just going off the dome, guys, tonight, so you'll have to excuse if this doesn't flow as well as my normal shows. I never script any of my lives, but I do tend to take bullet point notes of, like, talk about this, then this, then this. I have none of that, because I almost wasn't really in the mood to go live tonight. The heat's killing me lately. It's so hot. So nice, but so hot. But that leads me right into this point here. JD Vance showing up on the Joe Rogan podcast. They were talking about a lot. And I listened to the full episode. I literally listened to it today. The full episode on almost 2x speed just to be able to pull it off. And what started off as just kind of this likable kind of intro for a good hour, it felt like, of them reminiscing about how stupid that fat mouth bitch Kamala Harris was, and how dumb she was, and what she ran, taxpayer funded welfare for illegal aliens, and good times. It had me feeling a little nostalgic back then when I was thankful that Kamala Harris lost. I was like, oh, thank God we saved America. They were talking about how absolutely out of it Joe Biden was, eating ice cream all of the time and everything else. And then they also talked about the Alien Files, which I'll be frank with you, I have almost no interest in. And they spent a considerable amount of time on that. JD Vance wound up arguing with Joe Rogan about the concept of aliens and what they are. And JD Vance was arguing that he believes they may be more demonic and more demon-like entities, whereas Rogan was arguing strictly scientifically, I think they're extraterrestrial life forms that we can't explain biologically yet. Putting those aside, the nitty-gritty of today, truthfully, and I'll summarize it right now before going into it, the nitty-gritty of JD Vance's conversation with Joe Rogan, the entire time I was listening to it, to me, screamed early campaign introduction for 2028. That's actually what was going on. And JD Vance is actually smart for doing it. I give him props. Now, I'll never vote for JD Vance. I've done full episodes on why that is. But JD Vance is smart for pulling this kind of a maneuver right now as it stands, because everything's going to shit in the Middle East with the Iran war, and JD Vance, by name association, is going to have massive hurdles to overcome if he wants to be president in 2028, or technically true 2029. So that's what this was. And when they started talking about the serious stuff, which was the Iran war and the Israel lobby that he gets into, and the Epstein Files, you can tell that he's trying to prepare, and he's really trying to put the messaging out there now, that he can draw back to 2 years from now when he's all of a sudden bombarded with questions about this stuff. You can tell he wants it out there now. This was JD Vance trying to get ahead of all of this right now, and I'm going to explain it to you. Because JD Vance was talking about the Iran war deal. And Joe Rogan, of course, it's Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's a moderate. He's kind of a chill guy if you've ever listened to his podcast. He's not there to be some sort of like antagonizer or some sort of interrogative type questioner. Joe Rogan is like a conversational, I'm your buddy, let's get along kind of a deal. Let's smoke cigars and discuss anything and everything, which is why they talked about aliens for like 40 minutes. So Joe Rogan was never going to ask JD Vance the real questions, and he didn't. He didn't ask JD Vance about his Peter Thiel connections, or about Palantir, or Mithril, and how he worked at Mithril while he was in college. And he didn't ask about, the whole Shabbat type thing in Yale University alongside Vivek Ramaswamy, where he met his wife Usha, and how coincidental all of that is. He was never going to get into any of that. But instead, he did ask about the Iran war, and JD Vance was handling it like somebody trying to run for presidential office. So some of the questions that were being asked by Joe Rogan had to deal with outright. He did ask him where he stood on the Iran war, and you could see at the time too the dodgy political response that had already been cooked up ahead of time by Vance. He gave it elegantly, but nonetheless it was a political answer. And it's the one that will be predictably used, and it'll be the one he leans on for 2027 and 2028 when he decides to run for presidential office. It is the best possible answer technically. And he said, my job is not to be a political commentator as the vice president. My job is to be the vice president, to be the senior most advisor to the president, and to give him my thoughts and opinions. But ultimately, my job is to support the president, who is Donald Trump, and get the best possible result for him based off of the decision that he made. Very professional answer, very appropriate technically. Clean cut, right answer technically. But you can see how important that is that he got to say that on Joe Rogan in front of what will be millions of listeners. Because that is what his entire presidential run is going to have to bank off of. And you have to understand this. This war has been a disaster for JD Vance. A true disaster. And we went into 2025 with Trump as the president-elect, bringing alongside JD Vance with him as his vice president. And immediately we saw a push internally, and I've done entire episodes on this in the past, but I'll recap it again. We immediately saw the push, via the JD Vance memes on the internet, where MAGA, more unified than ever as it was in January and February of 2025, they were creating the lovable memes of JD Vance with the crazy hair in the face, dancing at nightclubs and everything. And they were really pushing for this idea that it would be Trump now in 2024, Vance in 28 and 32, and then people were saying Marco Rubio in 2036 and 2040. And people were pushing for this all back then, and they were lining up their ducks like this and saying, this is how it's going to be, and it's going to be Republican rule for the next 20 years. But JD Vance was the guy. He was the establishment guy, and he was the guy that was being pushed out for the masses to embrace early on. And all was well at first. People said, wow, look at him help Trump stand up to Vladimir Zelensky in the Oval Office when Vladimir Zelensky got testy with Trump. People were pointing out some of these things. But slowly and surely over the course of really this past year, 2026, where it was increasingly more clear that this was going to be another Middle East forever war prosecuted by Trump, who ran alongside JD Vance on No New Foreign Wars, who alongside JD Vance, technically a millennial, the oldest you can be as a millennial, but a millennial nonetheless, has tried to relate with millennials on the whole topic of Middle East fatigue. And he's done his best all along the way to speak to the millennials and relate with us about our Middle East fatigue. Our childhoods, in part, were defined by 9/11 and by war in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? And so JD Vance is there, and he tries to be the relatable millennial vice president. Guys, it's okay. Trump knows what he's doing. He's not like the other presidents. This will not be a forever foreign war. He's even at points in time tried to say, guys, you need to unlearn history. He's literally advocated for that, Vance. Not because logically it makes sense for him to say or even sounds smart for him to advocate for with the benefit of hindsight, but because he has to play the political game and he knows it. So he was at one point even saying, guys, unlearn what you know. This is Trump. Embrace Trump as the cult leader like the rest of MAGA does. Put your full weight and of faith in Trump. Trust in, not God, trust in Trump. This is what he was pushing for, JD Vance. Not because it sounds smart, like I said, but because I think he knew that there was the potential for this to spiral down into disaster, which on this channel, you know, I predicted the entire time it would be. I had so many delusional people in my chat say, you're a panicking. Trump is saying this will only last for 3 weeks. You need to trust Trump. Trump updated it to 4 to 6 weeks now, but that's really it. Can't you see what's happening here? This needed to happen, and Trump will get the job done. He always does. He's never let us down. You're just a panicking. You can't call yourself part of MAGA. How dare you not trust Trump? All the while, I was warning everyone, this will go on forever, and I've got it all recorded on this channel. It's like a library of my excellence now on this channel. It is like an homage to myself, and rightfully so. I have just been an absolute sheer prophet about most of this. I've been right. JD Vance's worst fears have been realized as a result of all of this. And really, let me explain it to you like this. I did another live episode about what we would see fracture-wise in MAGA and how it's based off of Israel and how it would start to show up in MAGA. And like with anything, it really does start at the top. And what we're seeing in the Trump administration right now, though it is heavily denied by Trump administrative officials, is a fracture that is forming between JD Vance and Marco Rubio. And I did an episode on this many, many weeks ago. But it is even more appropriate to talk about it now, as more and more things have advanced and taken place in the Middle East. And so what's happening with JD Vance is he, unfortunately, despite his best efforts, has become the face alongside Trump. Trump is the face of all of this, to be frank with you. But under Trump, the secondary face, right behind Trump there, that secondary face of this Iran war has become JD Vance. And this is how it all starts. We started this war, and I pointed out at the time back in March, I asked the question, said, isn't it funny how JD Vance has sort of disappeared? Vance has always been one to find himself in front of the cameras alongside Trump, openly supporting Trump and adding in his own 2 cents so he can appear smart and say the right things and continue to galvanize the base to vote for him in 2028. But after that war started, Vance disappeared. And if you remember the history of events correctly in the timeline, we then get that Wall Street Journal, I believe it was, that Wall Street Journal piece that was leaked. It was one of the longest articles I've read in many, many years. It took me about 45 minutes to read, and it was the most in-depth analysis and breakdown of what took place on February 20th, I believe it was, in the Situation Room between Netanyahu and Trump. Maybe it was Axios, now that I'm thinking about it. But either way, it was a huge leak. 45-minute long article. It broke down everything, the dialogue, what was discussed, who was in the room, why Netanyahu was in the room to begin with. People were outraged about it. And some people have long suspected that when Trump is making bad decisions, it is JD Vance perhaps, or at least people in his administration, because the vice president gets their own chief of staff, etc., and staffers. And it has long been hypothesized that it is actually JD Vance intentionally leaking articles like that as a means of being able to try to politically save himself at least some of the grief. Because that article, when it was leaked, after we started bombing Iran on February 28th, that article frames JD Vance as one of the biggest, most prominent voices opposing the idea of this Iran war that we're now in. And so that's where it really started. JD Vance is then mysteriously missing in action for several weeks. And then, if you remember right, and I pointed this out even at the time, I said this is Trump just agreeing to help protect Vance at Vance's request, no doubt. After that, what we saw was JD Vance get appointed to his new fraud task force administrative position as the vice president. This was literally to allow JD Vance to continue to distance himself from the Iran war while he works on domestic fraud. And this was in theory a good idea based off of the polling results of early on in 2025 when Elon Musk was heading up the Department of Government Efficiency, which was incredibly popular with the youth vote. Many young Republicans and even some Democrats were major fans, at least of the concept, while the Democrats, of course, always express some skepticism in how Republicans would carry it out. They acknowledged the idea of cutting down on fraud in the government was a good idea. And Doge was very popular with the youth for the few months that it was allowed to exist, before Elon Musk was ultimately ousted from the administration with a black eye, of course, and then went on Joe Rogan a few weeks later and said, it's all fucked, it can't be saved. I mean, that's the timeline of events there. So moral of the story was, it was popular then, and this administration recognized that, and they recognized the compromised position, I think, that J.D. Vance was in as a young vice president who's technically a millennial in his early 40s and should be vehemently opposed to Middle East action. So they give him this busy work that he can't possibly carry out as efficiently as Elon was doing, but it's just to keep him away from the war. And this goes on for a while, and it really kind of flounders. It's not doing much. Now they're investigating H-1B visa fraud, but I did the whole episode on that last week and how that's going to be a big nothing burger as well. And all of that is to say, all of this unfolded this way to protect Vance. And that's what was kind of happening here until the opportunity for peace presented itself. And that's when we saw J.D. Vance emerge. And I think this was supposed to be his rising like a phoenix moment, right? J.D. Vance then emerges from this backseat position in the Trump administration as this new fraudulent task force kind of guy. And he goes out and tries to get a ceasefire with Iran. This becomes his new mission now. And according to reports, the way this plays out actually is J.D. Vance is the one begging Trump more than once to be assigned this position. Probably because Trump looks at him and says, we just gave you the fraud thing so you could avoid this. But Vance in his in what I think is now very clear an error, sees a potential opportunity to now save the day by ushering in peace in place of war. And so eventually he hounds Trump, according to reports, more than once. The reports indicate twice at least. He begs Trump essentially, let me lead the peace talks. The reports, this is important to note too, because I'm going to get to this in a second. The reports also indicate that Trump originally had his eyes set on Marco Rubio for the position, but Marco Rubio, according to the reports I've read, was opposed to leading these talks for peace between the U.S. and Iran. And the reports state that Marco has always been skeptical of the possibility, even, of peace between Iran and the U.S. Therefore, he wanted nothing to do with it. And that's where Vance came in like a shark and saw his opportunity, or what he thought was an opportunity to save the day, begs Trump twice, eventually Trump gives it to him, and then what do we see? We see J.D. Vance attempt to negotiate a ceasefire for 21 hours in Islamabad, Pakistan, with Iran and U.S., with Witkoff and Kushner, actually. Now, reports indicate that during that time, Iran negotiators secretly texted J.D. Vance's phone, informing him that Kushner and Witkoff were directly sabotaging his efforts and that peace wasn't going to be possible. Don't know if that's true, but that's a confirmed report that's come out now, and we'll wait to see how that plays out, truth or not. All of that is to say, the 21-hour negotiation for peace in Islamabad, Pakistan, between Iran and the U.S. failed. And I covered it at the time on this channel. J.D. Vance leaves. There's a photograph of him walking down the hallways there in Islamabad. He looks so tired and pissed. 21 hours worth of negotiations utterly fail, and J.D. Vance flies home as a loser, having accomplished nothing. And re-emerging from this, now taking on the new face of all of this, and as a failure. The war resumes. We fire on Iran again. Things heat up. It gets worse. And now J.D. Vance's face is stamped on this. You hid during the start of this war, and now you can't even bring about peace. And this forces Vance into more of a desperate position. And eventually, you then fast forward a little bit more, and we get what's called the Memorandum of Understanding. And under this MOU, we now have the frameworks of a new peace deal, and JD Vance gets to claim responsibility for it. He helps usher it in, and we have the MOU. 14 points, reads as a surrender document. Went over all 14 points on this channel as well. Again, be sure to like the stream if you haven't already and subscribe so you can be tuning in when we go over these things like the MOU. Gone over all 14 points. It's a surrender document. Absolute total humiliation for the United States and for Trump. And Vance's face is now associated with that. Most Americans are unhappy with it. And even at the time when I was going over it in truth, I was receiving the pushback initially from MAGA. They were coming in saying, you don't know what you're talking about. That's fake news. Even many of them now recognize, yeah, that was bad, that MOU. That was embarrassing. So J.D. Vance's face is associated with hiding when this war started, failing to usher in an actual ceasefire in Islamabad, and then ushering in a memorandum of understanding that literally cucks us to Iran, and it's a complete surrender virtually to Iran. All the while, he now has to defend it. And then that fails. So not even that succeeds. And now it looks like we're going to full-blown war with Iran. And J.D. Vance is hopelessly stuck now with his face stamped on this war in secondary fashion right behind Trump's. So that's why J.D. Vance said this on Joe Rogan today. And I'm going to play part of the clip for you. Because now this is like one of his only ways out.
But I definitely think you have seen this very discreet, extremely well-funded campaign to try to derail the negotiation and try to derail the deal. And, you know, there's this Time article that came out yesterday. A friend sent it to me. It's like worth reading because it lists a bunch of people who have quite literally been paid by a former Trump campaign person who was himself paid by certain elements within the Israeli government. And those people are attacking me viciously for quite literally trying to accomplish the negotiation objective that the president set for the country. So
what is their position? Like, they're attacking you how?
Oh, it's social media posts. It's, you know, they're leaking to reporters. They're attacking me obsessively, saying that we should not be negotiating with Iran. We should just keep the military campaign going indefinitely, and that is their explicit position. And
it goes on from there. Now, this obviously has the Israel First lobby up in arms. Mark Levin is royally pissed at this. And you can tell that Mark Levin is probably gearing up for his weekend show where he averages 3,000 viewers per show to really, really do JD Vance in now, right? He's already retweeting all of these statements about how the anti-Zionist lobby in the right wing is the least popular lobby. It's the minority, and it's going to cost us elections. And the Republicans should not be leaning into this movement that's emerging in the right wing of being critical of Israel because it's deeply unpopular. Mark Levin's retweeting out against all of this, and he's calling out Vice President JD Vance already. But what you're seeing on there, and why I stated that J.D. Vance's appearance on Rogan screams as an early jumpstart to a presidential campaign for 2028, is because of moments like that. For all the reasons I just explained and the history and the unfolding of this entire war is why J.D. Vance has now had to go on Rogan. And truthfully, we saw him become more Israel critical. I think his instincts are right on that, objectively speaking. I'm not going to be a Vance voter, but I think his instincts are correct on that, and that's why he's doing it on Rogan now. Because, in all honesty, it's the only perhaps possible way that he can save any hopes of becoming president in 2028. He now has recognized the position that he's in, and I think he's adopting this strategy as a last-ditch effort. Much like how 103 Democrats officially split today in the House to side against the rest of the establishment in Washington. 103 Democrats voted to cancel foreign aid to Israel today, while every Republican minus Thomas Massie voted in favor of continuing to send the foreign aid to Israel, so the vote got shot down, the bill got shot down. Much like those 103 Democrats, who, by the way, and I don't know if I mentioned this early on, but those 103 Democrats were led by Nancy Pelosi herself, who has been funded and supported by AIPAC and has been in the past a staunch Israel supporter. And that should tell you something even more, because, and I don't mean to rant on this right now in the middle of my J.D. Vance analysis, but I know I didn't mention this early on, and I meant to. Nancy Pelosi, whatever you want to think about her, and trust me, I try not to, and I despise her overall. But when it comes to the opponent, you should always seek to understand them. Above all else, you should respect them. And Nancy Pelosi has had a lifelong career as a very successful Democrat politician. Perhaps not successful in what she's accomplished, depending on how you want to argue that. But the success lies in her longevity as a politician, which means she has incredible instincts. She's a very shrewd woman, and she's recognized that the winds are shifting in Washington and, more importantly, in the United States. So she sided, and you would think a boomer, she's the definition of a boomer, and she's been an Israel worshiper in the past. But she sided with the 103 Democrats who voted to cut the foreign aid to Israel today and supported Thomas Massie's bill, a Republican, because she knows that the winds have shifted. That's another big sign to you right there. And that's really what I wish the Republicans had, is somebody like Nancy Pelosi. Instead, we have Speaker Mike Johnson and John Thune and Trump. So yeah, that all happened. And JD Vance, I think, is one of the few Republicans, probably more so out of desperation than anything else, who's now latching onto this, or at least testing the waters of what it looks like to latch onto that, by calling it out on Rogan, and by also criticizing Israel just about a month ago when he advised them to not turn on the only ally they have left in the world. So that's what's happening. It was a campaign run today. And then he goes on to criticize the Trump administration for the handling of the Epstein Files, which I guarantee you will be another major talking point in in the nearest future elections, because the Trump administration has totally botched the Epstein Files. It makes them look terrible, and protecting the Epstein class, weirdly enough, coincides with supporting the Israel foreign lobby and the Israeli foreign support. Now, what I want to get to in all of this too is the fracture and how it's at the top. So while JD Vance has these struggles now as the failing face of the Iran war, can't get peace, and when he does, it sucks, and not even that lasts, essentially. And then he hides but when the war starts. We have Marco Rubio, who's going to be the other guy here. And I was reading this PBS News article today. It says Vance and Rubio take different approaches as Iran tests their 2028 prospects. Marco Rubio, unlike JD Vance, has made much better decisions on paper, at least, when it comes to his future prospects of becoming president. If you rewind the clocks back to January of 2025, when Trump was being sworn into office and JD Vance as our vice president, like I stated, January and February, you would have said, oh, JD Vance is for sure the guy in 2028. He'll be the GOP primary nominee. It's not even going to be close. Now you fast forward to modern day, and many people will say, I don't know, Marco Rubio looks real solid. Now, spoiler alert for you, like I said, I'm not only not voting for Vance, but there is no way in hell I'm voting for Marco Rubio. But regardless, if we're looking at it from an establishment perspective, Marco Rubio has made nothing but good decisions, and he's displayed nothing but incredible political instincts internally in the Trump administration that sets himself up for a much easier time, in my opinion, on a campaign trail for 2028 to become president. Unlike JD Vance, at the start of all of this, Marco Rubio got out into the forefront. So at least at first, he appeared strong and confident in the Iraq war. JD Vance, not so much. And unlike JD Vance, Marco Rubio, at the opportunity and the request seemingly from Trump to help broker in peace between the United States and Iran, declined that. And Marco Rubio reportedly remained skeptical on the possibility of peace being brokered in between the two countries. So he declined it. And unlike JD Vance, who jumped at the chance for peace, Marco Rubio only began distancing himself from all of this when it became apparent that this Iran war was not going to end as quickly as they originally thought. So it's now Marco Rubio who's taken the backseat approach at just the right time, declining to help broker in peace deals that he intuitively knew would never last. And in its place, what we've seen actually is Marco Rubio opt in to work with Israel, who of course loves Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio in the past has received massive donation amounts from the Adelson family, and Marco Rubio is a neocon and a war hawk for Israel and Cuba, etc. So he's now working on a peace deal between Israel and Lebanon, and surprise, surprise, that deal is actually at least halfway holding up and working on. It's working out a lot better. Israel has actually miraculously agreed to begin phased out withdrawals of their troops from the Lebanese borders, all with Marco Rubio clearing the way and ushering in the peace between the two of them. And in addition to all of that, Marco Rubio, if you really remember where his face is stamped on, it started last fall. It started really early last year, where I gave him props. I remember this because Trump appoints him to his new position and he's Secretary of State. And Marco Rubio gets out in front of the cameras last spring, 2025, and declares all terrorist organizations like Tren de Aragua, etc., to be terrorist organizations to America. I support that as an American, obviously. And he does that. And I remember thinking, I like that. Wow, do I like that? That gives our military permission to do what they then wound up doing in the fall, which was destroy the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan drug boats, which of course many people insist were fishermen, despite the fact that those boats had 3 onboard motors that cost literally $75,000 each attached to them, and barrels of God knows what on the speedboats. So that happens. Marco Rubio's face is on that. He's on that operation. He's on the operation, or on the incentive of and direction change of declaring drug cartels as terrorists. And his face is associated with the Venezuelan operation, which, unlike this Iran war operation, was and actually is successful. The Venezuelan operation, we kidnapped Nicolas Maduro in 2 hours, threw him in a New York City prison cell with his wife. We toppled the Venezuelan government, set up and propped up the vice president of Nicolas Maduro and told her, you better stay in line, and she has been for the most part. We've basically seized their oil and ensured that the oil is now not flowing out of Venezuela into Cuba, which is Marco Rubio's next target, as a Cuban himself. And so we've done all of that while ridding Venezuela, or at least beginning the process of ridding Venezuela of the Chinese presence that was plaguing our Western Hemisphere. And this is what good foreign policy looks like. It's the Monroe Doctrine in full effect, which I support. Again, and Marco Rubio's face is on it because he was the one that declared the drug cartels to be terrorist organizations. He's the one who's war hawkish on Cuba, and he's the face behind the Nicolas Maduro and Venezuelan operations. JD Vance's face is nowhere stamped on this. So that's the fracture. Now, the options are just an illusion of choice, mind you. Because again, Marco Rubio is out there as a neocon. Though I like the directions that he's taken in the administration when he's in more of a third in command type role, which is what he basically is, or fourth in command, whatever it may be, I certainly don't want Marco Rubio as a president. He's a neocon, and there's make no bones about it. He's a neocon, and he will continue to support Israel, and therefore likely support more foreign wars in the Middle East, if need be. So he's not still a good choice for president, even if he is a diligent worker. Give him props. He's a hard worker. He's holding 2 positions, and he's very politically cunning, very, very obviously politically cunning. And I respect the work that he's done in this administration overall. But I also know he's a bit of a wolf and a war hawk. So I don't trust him, and I don't want him as president. To vote for Marco Rubio is to vote for more of the same that we have right now, which is not good enough. More of that same neocon party. But to vote for Vance, as I've gone over in the past and will not go over tonight because I don't have time, but to vote for Vance is to just vote for Israel by other means. Because JD Vance, when he runs for president, like I've explained in the past, will be backed by Peter Thiel, the Republican, wealthy Jewish billionaire who owns Palantir. And Palantir will support Israel, and he'll fund JD Vance with the money to force Vance to support AI surveillance. So you're either getting AI surveillance with a little bit of sprinkled Israel on top of it, or you're getting tons of pro-Israel with Marco Rubio with more sprinkled AI on top of it. So it's an illusion of choice either way. But that's the fracture that's happening right now, and that's why JD Vance's appearance on Joe Rogan reads like a campaign trail type thing, because Vance is desperately trying to get out in front of all of this because he has to. And he hasn't politically maneuvered himself very effectively, in all honesty, thus far. And that really all goes back to the importance of ensuring that this administration, which has brought failure onto itself. We didn't want them to do this. They did it to themselves. And now they spitefully push forward on this path one way or another, and therefore must be allowed to be politically destroyed. And that will happen in the midterms if Democrats win. And that's why it's important that the Republicans don't win the midterms, which is sad to say as somebody who's a reactionary like myself. But I will not continue to keep voting for more of the same. The Democrats continually get power because of moments like this, and when they get that power, they ruin our nation more, and which causes the vote to shift back to Republicans. And then when Republicans get power, they take the name conservative to only mean conserving what we currently have. And that's why I'm not a conservative, I'm a reactionary. Reactionary means you want to go back. We want to go back. We don't want to progress. We've seen enough with that. I think we've progressed far enough, thank you. Men are chopping their penises off, and women are literally killing their children and claiming it as a personal right. I mean, children are reading books about gay sex in 5th grade now. I think we've gone far enough. I'm a reactionary, and I don't actually, believe it or not, want to conserve. I don't want to conserve what we have now, because what we have now is shit. So I want better, and I want more. But that's the problem with the Republicans, and I won't continue this vicious cycle of Republican cuckery to Israel and to the liberals, which is what we're seeing. Well, they completely have total power right now, and traffic stops now from the DHS for ICE have been halted, and Alligator Alcatraz is closed, and mass deportations aren't happening. They just cuck to everyone. They're in the cuck chair, and I'm not voting for that because I'm not a cuck. And that's where we're at with this. So that's what I wanted to go over for today. Did I have anything else I wanted to say? No, that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, I just totally winged that one, though, so I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I didn't take, like I said, I never script any of my shows, but a lot of times I have a little notepad on my computer, and I type out little bullet points to help keep it more of an organized presentation. And I literally just read like 3 articles. I was laying in bed debating if I wanted to get back out of it to do a show. The summer heat, as much as I love it and I hate winter, the summer heat kills me. I love the extra sunshine, but the heat that comes with it is brutal. So it's been, past 2 weeks I've been like, man. But ultimately I decided, yeah, I'll get out of the bed. I'll go live. The YouTube algorithm demands it. It demands it. I am a goy for YouTube. If I stop working even a little bit, it punishes me and throttles my views. So that was Off the Dome. Appreciate you guys for being here. Hopefully it was a good episode. I'll take a look at a couple of chats. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double tap your phone screens and hit the thumbs up button. That's free to do, and it really does help the algorithm push this content out to more people who need to see this. Also, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates if you enjoyed that, especially if this is not your first time being here. Subscribing is free, doesn't cost you a dime, and you can turn on post notifications so you're notified every time I go live, which is every night pretty much, except for when I'm really exhausted and burnt out. Then I take a day off. But other than that, yeah, I'll take a look at a few chats. Good job winging it, says MM. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. The biggest controversy, 5881, says Israel has already occupied southern Lebanon. They don't want to leave Lebanon after getting rid of Hezbollah. No, that's absolutely true. You're completely right on that. But Marco Rubio, at least as it stands right now, has worked out a ceasefire deal that is mostly holding, last time I checked, has mostly held between Israel and Lebanon. And Israel, on paper at least, and you're right to be skeptical, and I am too, trust me on that. But at least on paper, Israel, under Marco Rubio's negotiations and mediation, has agreed to begin withdrawing their troops in phases. So we'll see how that goes. And you're right to be skeptical. So Black Sun 14 says, you say no progress. Can you elaborate on what that means? Like, what about civilizational advancements in the West? Well, what do you mean by civilizational advancements? I guess that would depend. I want to go back, though. You have to understand that even what they call the far right wing nowadays is nothing compared to what our founding fathers were. Like, our founding fathers nowadays would literally if the left calls Trump supporters Nazis, I can't even fathom how they would view a Benjamin Franklin. I can't fathom how they would view a President George Washington walking around. They would lose their minds over what would be enacted and what would be done right now. And so it's like, that's what I want to go back to, truthfully. I want to go back in time way more. And I want the right wing to become way more extreme. I am pushing for more extreme conservatism. How far right is too right is really the question that we should be voraciously exploring. Because I believe, like it's almost like that meme with the two miners in the mine. I believe we can pickaxe and push way further right for a very long time before we go too far. And that's because the liberal left has forced the cucked boomer cons who have held power for way too long now to compromise on everything. And so right and left was like this at one point in time, post-World War II, probably truthfully in the 1940s, right? And then the left just went like this. And instead of the right matching it, the right was just pulled back more and more. And that's kind of where we're at. That's why we're currently sitting under a president right now who's a Republican, but truly acts like a New York Democrat at least half of the time. And that's why so many men are feminists without even realizing it. Like, I am not a feminist, but what that actually means is it means like I sound like a complete misogynist nowadays. But I just advocate for the biblical roles that are applied onto men and women. But like, feminism has breached all of our institutions. So men and women are just varying degrees of feminist. Some men may only be 20% feminist, but they're still 20% feminist. And that's just liberal ideology that's been soaked in, and that's why I'm a complete reactionary. I'm a reactionary. All of that has to be undone, all of it. And that's the only thing I stand for. I don't stand for any compromises at all. Not a single one. Abortion, illegal, comes with death penalty sentencing. Illegal immigration, totally illegal. Sent back every single time, without question. Literally just sent back. You're back. You're out of this country. I don't care your age. I don't care how long you've been here. I don't care about your circumstances. You're out of here. Immigration in general, where does that come from? Well, not from any third world countries in the distant future. No immigration for 40 years. After that, only from European countries. That's my hardline stance on that. That's what it means to be a reactionary. So, and I could keep going with that, but and that's really it. Now, civilizational advancements, I'm not exactly sure what you're getting at there. If you're talking about AI or if you're talking about, but you know, the whole liberal ideology needs to be destroyed. I am awesome says they would call the founding fathers terrorist anarchists. Yes, they would. They would. They'd probably put them in prison, and yeah, it would be bad. They'd probably insist the founding fathers have mental illnesses, actually. Oh, like technological advancements, colonizing planets and stuff like that. We're nowhere close to being able to do that. There's this issue that nobody has an answer for, and it's literally called astronauts go up into space for like 2 months, and then they come back down to Earth, and they've lost like 8% of their muscle mass, and their bones are hollowing out, and they're like, they have to like relearn how to walk. So I'm not even thinking like that, to be honest with you, because it's just not possible, and it never will be, at least not in our lifetime, just to be frank with you. Cool idea, but yeah, not possible. Mjolnir's Wrath says adherence to the actual foundation of the Constitution itself is what we need to do. Well, the country needs to become a lot more Christian again, since the Constitution itself and the Declaration of Independence was all written by majority Christians. And by that I mean 52 of 55 were Christian. And the nation itself was almost entirely Christian. And so when you find society now in this position where the Constitution is just violated by all of our politicians, it's because they're not Christian and they're not really representing as many Christians anymore. And the Christians that do exist don't demand the representation needed to restore this country to glory and morality. And so, You know, the Constitution literally does mean nothing. The reason we're in a constitutional crisis is because we're not a Christian nation in truth anymore. Howard Clegg says they were separatists. Exactly. We are separatists, Howard. They would listen to American advocates. Hopefully I'd make them proud. Probably they would still view me as too moderate, though, to be frank with you. And people are not aware of this, Howard, but it is so true. The Founding Fathers were extremely right-wing. But they definitely were separatists, that's for sure. Pickaxe Mountain, says David Cooper. You're talking about Iran, right? The Pickaxe Mountain thing? I read about that today. Terrible idea, but they're going to... Who knows what they're willing to try anymore. What appearance of JD Vance and Rogan? I just covered that for the last, 40 minutes. Australia is getting flooded with Islamic immigration. Yeah, that's all by design. It's only the Western countries, it's only the first world nations that are getting flooded with that. Mjolnir says a lot of men are effeminate, almost to the point of metrosexual being normalized. Yep, and they're okay with that too. That's also by design. Women's rights as we know them are unsustainable, says I Am Awesome. We really only have 10 years to fix this. Probably true. Women's rights in general, I agree with you on. Yes, I believe most of them are completely unsustainable. And the 10-year timeline is what I'm saying is probably true. The pull to the left comes from the Department of Education and the infiltration of college campuses. In large part, yes. Lifeguard, yep. And that's, again, what did I advocate for the other day? Guys, listen. The change that you want to see has to come from you, in truth. This is what people need to realize here. We don't agree with the chud-like notion of, you still think you can vote your way out of this? Yes, actually, to a degree at least. I have not lost faith in the voting in this country or in the republic yet. I think we're not really a republic anymore in truth, and I don't know if we'll ever get that back. But voting, they pour money into for a reason. If you think voting doesn't make a difference, or doesn't potentially, let's put an emphasis on that. If you think voting doesn't at least potentially, hypothetically make a difference, then look no further to Muriel Adelson spending $20 million with AIPAC money as well to oust Thomas Massie. They flooded that district with tons of money, record amounts, to impact the vote, so that way they could get Ed Galrain in place of Massie. It matters. Your vote actually still matters, and it matters so much that they're willing to spend millions of dollars to influence you. The second that they don't do that anymore is the second your vote doesn't matter. But we don't see that right now. We see millions, tens of millions of dollars be spent to influence your vote in ads. So really it comes down to educating the voter. It comes down to the fourth turning that we're in, and it comes down to the pacing of that, with the youth rising up and the education being fixed. And it comes down to good candidates being able to rise up and be voted for. And so that's the part you can control the most. You can become the good candidate. That's why in the other episode I went over the barrier of entry to some of these local offices and positions you can run for. People think that this is so far out of reach. You want to talk about education being the problem, lifeguard? Then find somebody. Lifeguard, I don't know if I'd advocate for this really, but find people around you who are good Christians and who care about the future, support them, or become them yourself, and run for school board then. School board controls the teachers, it controls the hiring and firing of teachers to a degree, it controls teacher salaries, it controls the curriculum, the education. If most of the school boards spread across America were filled with Christian conservatives, then we wouldn't have transgenders showing up in schools to do transgender celebration day or whatever it was, and read pornographic books to sixth graders. But that's not what happens. The people who are currently seeking power right now in this country are all of the people we don't want holding it. because the people who should hold power are too comfortable and complacent to rise up and disposition themselves just a little bit. It's a very individualistic, greedy, and complacent boomer mentality that's been passed down to us. I just want to be comfortable, man. I just want to be comfortable, man. It's like the stoner, hippie, sexual liberation, feminism, globalism, individualism generation. That was the boomers. They passed all of that. I just want to be comfortable. We don't have that luxury. And so we can affect the change. And like I pointed out in that other episode, regime change, like we've heard from Charlie Kirk, who was talking about Iran and why it was a bad idea for Trump to do it, but how he didn't want Trump to do it anyway, can't come from the top down. So the chuds who say, do you think you're going to vote your way out of this? They're wrong, but they're on to something that they don't even realize. We tried to vote our way out of this, and we tried top-down regime change with Trump. No, actually, we don't want a continuation of Biden, who really is a continuation of Obama. We don't want Kamala, so we're going to vote for Trump. We didn't like Biden, so we're going to vote for Trump. Your vote went towards top-down regime change, and look where it's gotten us. Nowhere. But ground-up regime change is where it works. And this is not regime change in the violent sense, because we don't want a civil war. That will harm our nation internally and leave us more open to attack or weaken our global position. We can't afford a civil war like what took place 150, 175 years ago. The world has changed too much for that. And I wouldn't advocate really for that right now anyways. I don't think it's actually appropriate right now. But the regime change I talk about that's ground up is school board, town council, town supervisor. All of these positions, rise up and run for them. And if you don't, you only have yourselves to blame as your country literally burns to the ground in front of you. But you don't have, and that the whole point in all this is to say, you don't have to be a billionaire. You may have to be a billionaire to run for president, unfortunately, nowadays, or you have to know billionaires that will fund you at least. But to run for school board, you need about, 500 signatures, not even. You need about 200 signatures. You need about $500 to $1,000. You need like 3 people helping you out, go door to door in your neighborhood. You don't even need that much, really. That's what it takes to run for a school board. It takes like a couple hundred people in support total. And it does a couple $100 maybe. And this is where you start. Build your resume, and you actually can start making changes, or at least fighting for them. So that's important. People need to hear that. Civic duty, says Cooper. It is. It is our civic duty because, if the country's going to go to shit, then it's our civic duty to try to save it. Mjolnir says boomers had 2 separately raised mentalities through the hippies and then the Vietnam vets. That's true. That's kind of true, yeah. Because my uncle was a Vietnam vet, and he was an OG noticer. He's what you would have called an OG noticer, my uncle. He passed away early from heart issues. But he's an OG noticer. He was talking about 9/11 and Mossad back when everyone got pissed about that kind of stuff. He would ruin family holidays back then. I was obviously too little to understand any of that. I just remember, hanging around during Thanksgiving and Christmas, and a bunch of shouting would start to happen. Yeah, but my uncle was a cool guy, and that's what he was. He was a veteran, so. Lifeguard says, hate to be a black pillar, but we're past the tipping point, and the only way out of this mess is going to be destructive and bloody when the people who just want to be left alone get involved. No, I don't think so. I don't think that ever happens, and so the only way out of this is truly to do what I'm advocating for, really. I think there's a situation where that can happen, and I've mentioned and talked about that in the past, but I truly do think that that's actually, in the long run, potentially worse off for our nation. First of all, the military will squash any of that. You're not standing up to the U.S. military, which swears an oath to protect against threats both foreign and domestic. So let's run a hypothetical here and say that even if Americans hit their breaking point, and they are like, "That's it, honey, honey, honey. Where is my AR-15, honey, honey? Where's my AR-15? A couple of the guys and I, we're gonna march on Washington." What's going to happen is the National Guard is going to show up with all of their equipment. They're going to show up with their tanks, and they're going to block off DC, and they're going to have their standard issue assault rifles, whatever those are anymore nowadays, M4s, M16s, I don't even know. Better than yours, with full round magazine capacity, since the good old Republican boys follow the law. So they're going to show up with their AR-15s with their five rounded magazines. 5 rounds per magazine only. Don't forget, they put a restriction on your Second Amendment right, and you follow it like a good boy. So only show up with your 5-round magazines for your AR-15. No more. And they're going to show up, and they're going to have all these guns pointed at them. They're going to be taken into custody. It'll be like J6, but way worse. And then there will be no Republican president that comes in to save them like Trump did with the J6ers. So they'll just rot in prison. And the rest of Americans will sit down and they'll bitch about it. And they'll say, that is unbelievable that Americans are being treated like that. And then that'll be it. That's what you're talking about. And if it's not that way, then just understand what we're also going through right now. Do you have access privately as a private citizen to one-way suicide drones that can literally just hone in on a target and literally just drill into your chest and detonate and kill you? Because if you don't, then you're not rising up against a government that has that. So no, that's actually not going to happen either, really. Now, anarchy in the streets could happen, sure. But if you're a white person doing that and you're a conservative, then they're, unlike with Trump and ICE immigration officials and how they're halting all of that, the second a brown revolt happens with brown people protesting that and they just withdraw from the cities, well, the second white men decide to flood the streets and protest and create anarchy and chaos and riot is the second that you see the National Guard, the full force of the National Guard, deployed into that city to fire on you, shoot first, ask questions later, round up the survivors, and then throw them in prison too for treason or whatever. So that's not really an alternative either. So, in my opinion, the smart way to go about this, or the smartest possible way, is to seize the moments that we have now as the boomer generation dies off and the window opens now, and we have a very small window to work with, but it is ground up. And if you have more notoriety and you have more money and you went to school for, say, law or for political sciences, and you have a degree in anything like that, and that adds instant credibility, then run for higher positions and bypass it and go for state level stuff. But if not, then start somewhere. Start even just showing up to your town hall meetings and networking. But figure out what's open and start taking those positions. If the movement can't grow that way, then it's not going to grow any other way. Another part of this being a problem with your outlook on it too is the community element that I've talked about is missing. And so, yes, some states have militias. No, they're not good enough to take on the National Guard, and they're not going to achieve the vision that you could see playing out. And the community otherwise is dead. So while 2/3 of Americans own guns, 2/3 of Americans don't know each other, and they don't really leave their houses much anymore, and they don't go to church every Sunday, and they don't really talk amongst each other that much, and they have very small circles, if anything, and they hate their neighbors anyway. So that's also missing. But if you do it through networking and politics, it's a structure that's already built, and it's made to be infiltrated, truthfully. That's literally how it works, actually. And you network that way, and you actually simultaneously then build up a network with people who you learn to trust, who are also driven towards the same goals you have, while you actually make a difference by taking power. Because you may look down on a school board position, but that is actually a position of power, even if you don't think it matters that much. I think it does, and it's a position of power that most Americans will never hold. But there's plenty of good Americans who should at least try to hold it. It goes back to the Teddy Roosevelt speech that I posted on July 4th. There is no worse way to go about life than with a sneer. And it's all about the man in the arena. And it's like, the man in the arena, that's where we need to find ourselves. as Teddy Roosevelt talks about, who wipes his face from all the dirt and sweat and blood and fails towards success as we get into the arena and actually fight for what we believe in. Rather than, and no offense, lifeguard, because I totally understand. And in the past, I've said that I'm a conflicted person sometimes when I go live because I have up and down days, like probably you do. And so I've even said similar things like you did in this chat. So I'm not even trying to call you out. But as opposed to being the man in the arena, sitting and waiting around for the inevitable chaos and anarchy to come about, I don't want to do that. I don't. It's not that that's not a possibility. I just don't think. I think the success percentage, chance of success is very, very small on it, and I think we still actually have at least somewhat of a chance to take matters into our own hands. The real problem is good Americans just haven't done that for decades now. I'd like to at least see what America looks like if more good Americans rose up. Lifeguard says, I see where you're going, but a lot of people like me are pretty much set locally. My community is already ahead in the fight against data centers, just for example. Yeah, my community's not doing too bad on data centers either, actually, and I'm very thrilled about that. That being said, it doesn't change the fact that in your community then, if you have good people, they need to continually be trying to work their way up then. Because it can't, I'm not saying it just ends with school board or town council, or anything. That's why I talked about tiers. You got to then go for county council, and you got to try to hit mayor or something. It's like working your way up. You can't just stop in those positions. You've got to be ambitious if you want to save the country. You've got to get in at the entry level if you don't have the experience to start off higher. If you can't, Howard Clegg will appreciate this. I think if you can't go from boot camp to private first class or right up to lieutenant, basically, if you're JROC or whatever they are. I still remember high school. But if you can't do that, then you have to work your way up. You have to start off as the grunt, and you have to go up to an NCO, and then you keep going now, because you still can do it. It just takes longer. So if you have the credentials, just go right off the bat. If you have some notoriety and the money, whatever. But if not, the entry level is where it goes. But you don't want to be content there, is the idea. You gotta, I don't know. And not everybody's cut out for this, but we need people with good political instincts to take this path, and we need more of them. Yeah, we'll see what happens, lifeguard. The collapses and stuff. We'll see what happens with that. Hopefully the Trump administration, Vance and Rubio, will get ruined after midterms so someone new can come up in 2028, says, I am awesome. I agree with that, yeah. Yeah, I do agree with that. Socialism always fails societies. Capitalism has failed us too, though. Look at what food corporations are doing, putting money before people's health. We're the only country that puts money over health care. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from on that. And it's really the leadership that hasn't properly maintained or implemented capitalism correctly is the actual issue. Capitalism is capitalism, unlike socialism, which does always fail. Capitalism has the best results for the individual. But when you have the corruption that goes unchecked as a result of moral degradation and erosion of morality in society, a lack of Christian ethics, and a lack of accountability, then yes, capitalism can be exploited nearly similarly to socialism in some ways. Do I know what a boomer is, says M. Brown. Yeah, would have been born between the years of what, 1943 to 1961? Or 1947 to 1961, is it? What about the foreign aids to 57 Muslim countries like Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and all those undemocratic countries? What about it? What about it? What kind of question is that? What about the foreign aid? Oh, actually, I support those. I support those countries. Oh yeah. See how stupid that fucking sounds? All politics is local, says Selena Girl. Well, certainly starts with that. Junior ROTC, says Howard Clegg. Yes, exactly, Howard. Howard, you're, I saw, what are you? You were chief warrant officer, right? Is that what you were? I saw that in your Twitter bio. I think I asked you what your rank was once, but chief warrant officer 4, was it? Pretty good. And Howard, you had to deal with the annoying, well, what brand? Army, right? You had to deal with the lieutenants then, those fucking know-it-alls. You had to deal with them. Sometimes starting off at the base level is better, and Howard will probably agree with me on this. The boys, more often than not, you think they hate their sergeants, so they get screamed in the face by them during basic. But no, the boys wind up loving their sergeants, especially in combat. It's the lieutenants that are hated. So sometimes you get the rich bitches that run, they skip the school board step or the town council step. They don't have the humble beginnings. They're not the grunt that worked their way up to NCO. Instead, they just come out of school and they get the little gold logo. I'm a second lieutenant. And they act like they know a lot more, and they're really actually underqualified, but they've been told they're overqualified. And so sometimes there's an advantage to starting off at the school board and working your way up. That's how I actually view that. It may be a much slower process and not as fancy looking or appealing to the ego to say, "Oh, I'm a town council member." But no, you start there, get some experience, build your resume up, and then run for something at the county level, and then go for mayor. And then you have more of a proven track record, and you've been built up correctly to see how the process works, as opposed to just showing up from school and thinking you know everything because you took a couple of tests and passed. So there's something to be said for that, and that's kind of why I actually like that path better. That being said, if you have the money and you can skip the process, you probably should, and you should just run for state senate or whatever. But sometimes it's better to have a political career anyway and work your way up the ranks. Sometimes my algorithm pisses you off. I know, dude. When it pushes it out, it attracts a lot of trash. Dude, David says, lifeguard, I actually like that I'm not so doom and gloom since watching now, but I know what you mean. Dude, I totally understand where lifeguard's coming from. I sadly can't even fully disagree with them. So it's not even a matter of disagreeing. It's just what I'm trying to advocate for. And hopefully everyone can at least understand where I'm coming from on that. It's in my opinion the best shot we have. CW4, yeah, exactly, Howard. That's awesome, man. Awesome. Bear says, my brother's a disabled vet and somebody called in a welfare check on him and they evacuated the block and surrounded his house with snipers? Why would they do? Does he have history though, Bear? That sounds kind of crazy. Yin Yang says, these guys are dummies. They don't even have degrees. They don't have nothing. Half of them, they're just business owners. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. If we have qualified people, just start off somewhere. But, honestly, I don't even mind for me, at this point, I think it should be clear with how Trump has panned out that electing a nationalist without the Christian ethics and the morality behind it, electing a populist without himself being an ideologue, won't save our nation, because look at how that's turned out. And so really what I'm looking for is for somebody who's going to rise up as a populist and ideologue. And we're almost at a point right now where there's a unique window of opportunity opening in this fourth turning where at least the young men in America, for sure, increasingly so, are looking for that. And there's a possibility for it to be a scenario where the candidate embodies both the ideological and populist stances, because they're blending together as our nation deteriorates. So a lot of young men are becoming idealistic in their views, and because more men are embracing these views, it's becoming the populist view as well. And we thought that would be Trump, but Trump is not a Christian and he is not an ideologue. He is only a populist nationalist. And so he does love America, in my opinion, but because he's a populist, he doesn't have a spine and he doesn't have convictions that continually push him forward despite the struggle or the initial resistance. He folds at the first sign of resistance for almost everything, and really the only thing we've seen him be an ideologue for is Israel, as he continues to prosecute this war with Iran. That is the worst thing he could do. If there's one thing we want Trump to taco out on, right, it would actually be nice if he tacoed out of Iran, but he actually won't. He's actually an ideologue for Israel, and that's it. He's not an ideologue for anything else. What is it now? The whole point of being here would be ruined if our creator revealed himself and verified that our use of free will is being measured. The whole test would be ruined. What are you talking about? Michael Cox says should be a law. No golfers allowed for public office. No, I'm actually, to be honest with you, man, I'm literally okay with presidents golfing. That's like their right, in my opinion. It's a very, even if you hate the president, you got to recognize it's a very brutal job. If they can go blow off steam for 5 hours for 18 holes, let them. I'm okay with that. I've never been one to moral fag about, oh, look at that, Obama on the golf course again. Oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. What is this, Trump's 8th trip to his golf course this year using Air Force One? Can't believe it. I don't care. I don't care. They can golf. That's fine with me. If you don't know anybody wealthy, then you don't even understand that even at golf outings, if you're a high society type guy, then even golfing is not pure R&R. You're oftentimes there with other powerful wealthy people making business deals. But a lot of people will never understand what it means to be successful like that, so they don't even know. But I've never done that. Not with Obama, not with Biden the few times he did it, and not with Trump either. They can golf. The next president in 2028, they can golf too, whether that's Gavin Newsom or JD Vance or Rubio or hopefully actually a dark horse candidate. They can go golf. I'm more than okay with that. Foster, you're such a rage baiter. What does ideologue for Israel even mean? Israel deserves every single dime of our support. Well, let's give them more money then, Foster. Foster, wow. I totally agree. Why aren't we giving them 5 times the amount? Another 10 trillion for Israel, says Pan Medico. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I do agree with that, Chris Jensen. Yeah, I advocate for age limits on all political offices. It should be 65 and under. There should be an upper age limit on the presidency. All these old men make decisions that they personally won't be living with. Yeah, I totally agree. 65 and under. And that should cut down into terms too. So, in my opinion, let's say a president somebody tries to run for president at age 64 and they get in. Well, then they're out at age 68. They're not eligible to rerun for a second term then either. No 72-year-old president. Nope, you're done. You're absolutely done. We don't need any more old people as presidents of this country or in office. Every politician should be forced into retirement at age 65. That should be the last year you hold office. If you're president, you can run up till 65 because then you'll at least be done by the time you're 69. No 70-year-olds in office at all. That's my stance on that. The founding fathers were not 60, 70, and 80-year-olds. They were 20, 30, and 40-year-olds. If Newsom is president, I'll eat an Amtrak train grill. We'll all want to, that's for sure. Hopefully that's not what happens. Although I'll be honest with you, I would actually rather have Newsom over AOC because I am a sexist and I despise the idea of a woman president in this country. We haven't seen this amount of hatred for the Jews since the 1930s. Well, it's not actually technically the Jews we hate. We just hate the country that we created for them in 1948. Thanks for the 100. Thanks for the 100 gift there, Apex. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, old people don't care how their policies will hurt in the long run as long as they're comfortable in the short term. Yeah, and the generation, the boomers, that are most associated with greed are more incentivized than ever to drag race on the economy even more so they can enrich their pockets for the last 5 and 10 years they're alive and then die while we face the consequences for it. So, I agree. American Advocates. Did you by chance listen to Chris Webby's new song? No, I don't even know who Chris Webby is. Okay, let's make it age 60, says Michael. I could be persuaded. We have some cool boomers, though, Mr. Jason West, who says boomers were not nice. I agree, but we have cool boomers even in the chat. We have Selena Girl and Lisa and Howard. So it's not the individual always, but yeah, collectively as a generation, they were a terrible generation. Otherwise, guys, hey, I'm going to wrap it up from there, though. Appreciate all of you guys for being here, as always. Thanks for tuning in. This was an off-the-dome, off-the-rip kind of stream, and I appreciate you guys for tuning in, as always, and watching. Be sure to like the stream if you haven't already. Double-tap your phone screens, hit the thumbs-up button. That's free to do, and it really does help the channel out tremendously. It helps the individual live streams out when you do that. Pushes them in the algorithm more. Also, be sure to subscribe, especially if this is not your first time being here. I go live pretty much every single night, Sunday through Friday, Saturdays too for the most part. One day off a week, it's always a random one, but for the most part I'm live pretty much every single day. So turn on post notifications so you're notified every single time I go live. And if you're already a subscriber and you're really enjoying the content, consider becoming a member today. But other than that, glory to America. God bless the USA, the best country on earth by far, and it's not even close. Still wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And may God bless all of you. As I send you this link, go check out, actually, first of all, should we do this first? Yeah, we should. First of all, guys, here's the other thing. Go follow me on X. Let's do that. So many calls to actions I'm bombarding you with. You got to like the stream. You got to subscribe. You got to share. You got to comment. But you also have to go follow me on X. Don't just rely on this platform for American advocacy. Go follow me on X as well, at American_advo. Click that link, click follow. Like every post I post on there. I do post unique content on X that you don't hear me talk about always on here. David Cooper's been following me on there. Howard Clegg's been following me on there. I've seen a few of you start to show up, and I could use the signal boost on X, so go follow me on X. And then in addition to that here, go check out this video as well. If you want to support the channel, go check out this video from a past stream. Give it the full watch time if you want to support the channel. Like it, comment on it, share it with a friend. The clips are good for sharing with friends. Hype it up. If you guys know how to hype, that's the other thing I'll leave you guys with. David Cooper has figured out how to hype the videos that I post like that, and it makes a huge difference for the channel. Hyping is like liking on steroids for YouTube. They want people to hype the videos, and it's made a huge difference for my videos. It's pushing them out to way more people, which just helps the channel grow way more. And it helps the movement in general that we're creating here. So, yeah. Go hype those videos. Figure out how to hype. Learn how to hype the videos and hype them for me like David does. Other than that, though, guys, have a great rest of your evening. And Mjolnir says, Chris Webby, raw thoughts. Okay, hang on. I'll copy that right now. I'll take a listen later on tonight. Tune back in some other time, and I'll tell you what I think. Hang on. Let me pull that up on Google. It's on a tab here. Okay, I got it pulled up on a tab there, Mjolnir. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Otherwise, guys, have a great rest of your evening, all right? Glory to America. God bless the USA, and God bless all of you. Take care.